I am here today at the London Stadium to sit down and chat with Stuart Pearce. We're going to be looking back on his early days, both his experiences as a player and a manager, what it was like representing his country and his hopes for England at this summer's World Cup. Stuart, it's funny being here because I suppose when everyone thinks of you, Stuart Pearce, they think of West Ham or they think of England. But right back, let's go back to the early stages. Football wasn't quite laid out for you in the most traditional way. So how did you feel that unconventional start shaped you as a player?
It certainly kept me grounded over time. You know, I didn't come into the pro game till I was 21 and qualified as an electrician. I was still trading as an electrician 4 years after I turned pro and advertising in the Forest programme. So real different times in those days. But when I look back now, it was probably the best route I could have taken, you know, slow into the game. But people say to me, how come you were such a late developer? I was literally just that, a late developer, and probably a little bit small in those days, but got here eventually, let's say.
Now obviously you had the choice to go to Hull, didn't you?
Yes.
But you chose non-league Wealdstone. What was behind that decision?
No, I was at Wealdstone actually. I left school at 16,
Yeah.
had nowhere to play football,
Yeah.
and when I was 17, Hull City took myself and the captain, John Watson, from Wealdstone up to Hull for a 3-day trial.
Oh, right.
So we played against Grimsby. So I've played in the local derby for Hull Reserves against Grimsby.
Oh, wow.
Sat down after a couple of days on trial,
Yeah.
and Mike England, the manager then, he offered me a contract. They were in the bottom division, Division 4 as it was then, offered me a contract and a job on Humberside Council as electrician to carry on my apprenticeship, believe it or not. But it just at 17 years old, it seemed too far away from home, so I sort of turned it down at the time.
Do you think now, looking back, Stuart, that if you hadn't have made that decision, your career would have turned out completely differently?
Yes, I do actually. I think by the time I sort of turned pro, I'd played 250 times in a non-league setup, so I was almost battle hardened, for want of a better word. Been around the block. Unfortunately for me, when I turned up and went to Coventry at that stage, after 2 weeks, probably because I had the grounding I did, my first game was in 2 weeks of arriving. I ended up getting straight in the first team and not coming out.
What was your experience at Coventry like then?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
There was so many senior players in the dressing room. Kenny Hibbett, Bob Latchford, real old heads and senior players, along with a few players like myself that have been bought from the lower leagues to come in. So it was a brilliant grounding for me. And as I say, I was there less than 2 years. The club never even talked to me about signing another contract until probably it was too late and I knew that Forest had an interest.
Yeah. I mean, we'll move on to Forest in just a second, but I just want to get your thoughts whilst we're here on Coventry and obviously getting promoted to the Premier League and everything that club has been through. How wonderful is it to see them back in the big time?
Well, I mean, firstly, let's talk about Frank Lampard being there.
Being at West Ham,
When I joined West Ham as a 37-year-old, Frank was coming through the ranks with a lot of other talented players. You could tell he was an outstanding professional at the time. His dad was there on the coaching staff, driving him on as well. So it's no surprise he's gone on to bigger and greater things in management. And for the club as well, they've had so many tough times over the years, Coventry. For them now to arrive in the Premier League is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So obviously let's talk about the move then to Nottingham Forest. Was it Brian Clough came calling and you couldn't say no? How did that all come about?
First indicator I had with Cloughy was I was playing at the City Ground for Coventry. I think it was the March. I went in for a challenge with one of the Forest players, Steve Wigley. We both went down injured. A physio ran on the pitch to treat my leg. When I looked up, it was the Forest physio. He ran over to me and said, "How old are you, son?" I said, 22. He said, "Thanks," and run off again. So Cloughy had sent him on to find out, you know, how old I was and that type of thing. So it's probably the first time I caught his eye. And that summer, obviously, I was off and got a move there, which to work for the great man was incredible.
Yeah, talk to me about that experience then. Not just working under him, but you know, Forest is such a huge club with such, you know, incredible pedigree, not just in England, in Europe as well. So what was it like?
Well, the first thing, I think, when you had an interest from Brian Clough, I was signing for him more than Forest. I've got to say that at the time. You know, I had a love affair with Forest eventually, but the bottom line is you sign for Cloughy and his personality and everything that he stood for. But as soon as you walk through the doors at Forest, I was in a dressing room that had European Cup winners in there, you know, and John Robertson and Ian Bowyer and Birtles and people of that ilk. And the history was all on the walls, you know, like that pride history here where we are today at West Ham with Bobby Moore and the like, you know, and Moisey with a trophy he delivered. But Forest has got its own history and own DNA as well. And as I say, we sort of, probably that team, took us a year or so to get going and improve, but all of a sudden we started getting to cup finals and Carabao Cup finals, or Littlewoods as it was then, so great times.
And just about Brian Clough as a man, what was he like to play under? I know you said you were signing for him rather than the club, but I mean, there's a lot of us out there that will know, but there will be some people out there that don't know what Brian Clough was like as a manager.
The word changeable springs to mind. Some days he was fantastic, on other days, you know, you would pull your hair out with him. You know, I got picked to play for England for my first time. I was 25 years old. I'd been working for him for 2 years. I was his captain at the time, and I was a bit nervous about representing England. The Brazil was going to be the first game I played in. 100,000 at Wembley, and there's that nervousness in what you're going to do. And then he calls me into his office the day after I get picked and asks me whether I think I'm good enough. I say, I'm not sure. And he said, well, I don't, get out. And that was the conversation I had after my first selection for England. So, as you say, I mean, people of your age would probably think to themselves, why didn't you report him to HR? But he actually was the HR department in those days, you know.
Oh, I love that. Now, from that, Stuart, I understand that, you know, Brian Clough could have been a little bit harsh with you at times.
Yeah.
What do you felt like you learnt from him that maybe you took into your managerial career as well?
Team ethic was always his big thing, you know. Basically, if someone laid a goal on for you and you didn't go over and shake his hand afterwards, he'd take you off.
Really?
Yeah, team ethic, passing your mate the best ball you possibly can, and playing football in the right way. You know, playing the game in the right way was, on occasion, more importantly than winning the game. You have to do it in the right manner. So, and life skills. He taught you life skills. I worked with him from the age of 23 to 31, so really influential period of my life. Exactly. So, yeah, they're the main things he taught us.
And also, you know, he's not the only manager you had the privilege of working under. Obviously, the likes of Glenn Hoddle, Sir Bobby Robson as well. Who do you feel like, out of the managers that you worked under, who had the biggest impact on you, do you think? Was it Brian Clough? Brian
Clough would be the one, but in a strange way, all managers have had some sort of input, and you've took that on your journey, and you think to yourself, hang on a minute, would I do that? And if the answer's no, that's taught you a great lesson as well. But Bobby Robson, 2.5 years, you know, picking me to play for England was incredible, an incredible ambassador for the game. Two great coaches, Venables and Hoddle, I thought were really good coaches, that were really informative to me. But listen, right across the board, Kenny Dalglish, Hullet, you name it.
Is there anyone you haven't worked under? You're listing all of the best names in football, Stuart.
Mourinho and Ferguson, you know,
are they the two
to name but two.
You could, yeah.
Not to mention Harry as well. He's a brilliant man motivator.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about management then, because obviously you came back to West Ham with David Moyes in both of those stints.
Sure.
Initially, talk me through that first stint and what that was like.
Well, the first one was, you know, David come in and joined the club, and I think Alan Irvine, who was his confidant and one of his coaches, I worked with Irv up at Newcastle, and he suggested to David that I bring a friendly face to the West Ham fans through the door, and that he made the phone call. I'd always seen him in and around games and stuff like that, and had a good relationship with Dave, but never worked with him before. And to get the call to come in at West Ham was just fantastic, coming back to a club that I knew reasonably well. I was only here for 2 years. I knew reasonably well, good relationship with the supporters as well. And to work with Moisey taught me a lot. You know, I was 59, 60 years old at the time, but he taught me so much. And I wish I'd have worked with him probably 20 years ago. You know, his work ethic's unbelievable. And any young coaches want to know what it's like to manage a football club, how you have to do it, the thoroughness, the technical input you have to put in. Worked with Moisey for 6 months, just fantastic.
And then when you came back the second time, when I think it was consecutive top 7 finishes, was it, for West Ham? And then they go on to lift the Europa Conference League, which is the greatest day in West Ham's history. So what was that? Almost like contrasting experiences.
I remember we were on the pitch doing a training session one day before before the club lifted the European Cup, and I said to Dave, I said, look, this club's over 100 years old, and look how many things it's won. And there was 3 things, I think, on the stand. I said, wouldn't it be brilliant if you delivered something for this club? I didn't realise that within probably less than 2 years, he was going to deliver a European trophy for the club.
Yeah.
But listen, someone like him, I think that was his first trophy, major trophy, and he deserves that for the work that he puts into every football club that he works for.
Yeah, it was a brilliant night, and I think West Ham fans would take that back in a heartbeat. Obviously, like I said at the start, Stuart, when we think of you, or a lot of people think of you, they think of West Ham. Now, you've said you were only there for a couple of years, so what does that say about the connection that you built with this club?
It's a working class area, and I think they saw a work ethic in me.
Yeah.
And I often think in the clubs that I've represented, probably they've looked at me and thought, you know what, I'll play football for a living, stood on the terraces, and if I'd have put as much in as he has, I might have been there. They see a little bit of themselves in me, I think, you know, and they obviously see someone, I hope they see someone that's humble, and every time he puts a shirt on for that club, gives his best.
And how do you look back then on your time at West Ham those 2 years?
It was incredible. I mean, I turned up, I hadn't played for 8 months. I was at Newcastle, couldn't get a club for love nor money. I was 37 years old, no one would touch me. I rung Harry personally and 4 other Premier League managers.
Who were the other 4, do you remember?
I can remember 2 of them.
Yeah.
One was Graham Taylor at Watford, who was in the Premier League at the time. One was Gordon Strachan at Coventry.
Oh, nice, okay,
I pitched myself in where I thought I could get in the team.
Yeah.
No one, you know, I had calls back from all of them saying, look, we don't need someone, but basically they were saying, look, you ain't played for 8 months and you're too old, which is fine, you know, that's management.
Yeah.
And Harry, I thought Harry was stringing me along. You know what H is like, he tells you what you want to hear. Stu, we would love you down here, brilliant, you and Dixie, you know, pure violence down the left-hand side. The punters at Upton Park will love you.
Yeah.
It went quiet, and then 8 days before the season was due to start, I come back in from training on the Friday, looked at my phone, Harry Redknapp's name come up. I rung him back, he said, I've got it over the line with the chairman. Come down Monday, we play Tottenham, first game of the season, you're starting. He hadn't even seen me and told me I was playing next Saturday. It was incredible. So I come down, I walked in the dressing room, I've got to say, it was like the Dirty Dozen in the dressing room with Di Canio and Razor and Monker and a few others. But it had its own DNA in there, you know. And I always worried, I never played well at West Ham, away from home. And I always thought, I hope it's not just this ground. But when you wear the home colours in front of the fans, it was just fantastic.
And you mentioned the Dirty Dozen and having Di Canio in the dressing room and stuff, but your nickname's the Psycho. So surely you'd have fitted in well, no?
Well, by name only. I didn't try and live up to that, all right.
What memories does that bring back for you on that nickname then?
For me, it was interesting. I've played 1,000 games in my career, if you include non-league, and I've been sent off 5 times. So the nickname doesn't
match up.
Doesn't go. No, it don't. If you've been sent off once every 200 games and got the nickname Psycho, but in those days, you know, Dixie was the Terminator, and I ended up getting christened Psycho, and which is all well and good until you're out for a nice quiet meal of an evening, and a group of fellas start singing Psycho across a restaurant. You know,
not like that, no.
No, never really try to live up to it. Let's say, you know.
As Stuart, we've obviously spoken about your call up to the England squad. Talk to me about your first game then against Brazil.
Yeah, if you've got to make a debut, Brazil at Wembley's not a bad one, 100,000 people. I remember being in the tunnel and myself and 10 other Englishmen lined up alongside 11 Brazilians, and thought to myself at that stage, I'm the only electrician in this tunnel. Quite incredible, really, very humbling. And then a few days later, we went to Hampden to play Scotland. So 2 brilliant games to make my debut, and my mentality was, if I play well today, I'll stay in the team and
that's exactly what
accumulate some weight. Yeah, it was, until start of next season. Kenny Sampson, who was a regular left back, come in, who was an outstanding player. But listen, so proud to represent my country. It's incredible.
What was your favourite moment representing England?
I was fortunate enough a few years later to captain in England, so to actually walk out at Wembley. I think it was Alan Shearer's first game against France. To walk out at the head of the team, it was drummed into me to be a team player, but to do something that's an individual accolade, if you like, was incredible.
Have you got the armband still?
Yeah, it's tucked away. So I'm not one of these people that have pictures up or anything in my house. No, I don't. I love going in other people's houses and seeing their memorabilia, but in mine, it just stinks of looking backwards. I don't know why.
But you don't like looking back at.
I enjoy having the odd chat about it and stuff like that. Yeah. But
if it's a constant reminder.
Yeah, it feels strange to walk into my own house and have stuff. I've got one picture on my office wall. It's the only picture I've got. Is a picture of me bending over, so the picture's taken there of the top of my head, and you can see my name on my shirt, putting the ball on the penalty spot at Wembley against Spain. So that's the only picture I have in my house.
Now, obviously, you will forever be tied to 2 penalty shootouts, Italia 90, Euro 96. Let's go back to the emotions. Let's go to Italia 90, and how do you feel looking back on it now? And do you still remember what it felt like at the time?
Definitely. Probably the lowest moment of my footballing career, without a doubt. We were so close to going all the way to a final and potentially winning it. But as I always used to say, sometimes when you have a real low moment in your career, as long as you're prepared to embrace that and learn the lessons from it. For me, it was preparation for penalties. When I took over the under-21s, they were prepared to the nth degree under my care because of that experience. And 2, I went into a drugs test afterwards and sat with 2 German players for 2 hours. You couldn't leave the room till you'd give a urine sample, and they didn't say a word to each other. Very, very humble in success. So that taught me a lesson as well in that respect.
How difficult was it to get over?
It was tough, but in some ways it was easy. The following season, I ended up scoring 16 goals, no penalties from left back, because my mentality coming back from the World Cup, where the rest of the squad were thinking they've played into July, they're fatigued, they're tired. My mentality was, I want to start playing again. Everywhere I went, every away ground I went to, I got dogs abuse from the fans, and it just spurred me on. So I found out a little bit about myself. I was more than capable of handling adversity.
What about Euro 96 then?
Different one altogether. As I say, while the World Cup was my first ever tournament for my country, that one was my last. And on home soil, and in the borough that I was an electrician. So I'd been around the block at that stage. I knew exactly what it meant. I had it on my mind to retire from international football after that tournament. So every time I kicked a ball for England in that tournament, certainly at knockout stages, I thought it was the last kick in an England shirt. So I sort of savoured every moment, if you like. But it was just nice to score a penalty. Very matter of fact I am as a person. So it wasn't a case of, oh, I've missed a penalty a few years ago, should I take one? It was, hang on a minute, I'm one of the best 5 penalty takers in this team. I'm gonna put myself forward to take a penalty.
Now, it's such an iconic celebration. Can you take me back to that moment? Was it relief? How did you feel?
Yeah, it's a strange one. Probably that picture is the one I signed the most and people remember the most. And they say to me, what were your thought process, like you have with that question? I said, it reminds me of 2 years earlier when Terry Venables rung me as England captain and said, Graham Lassau's going to be the left back. And I stayed in the squad, fought for my place, and it took me a year and a half of being a bit part player, working under Graham, before he got injured and I got back in the team. So being on the penalty spot that day reminds me of the journey that I give to England when I was in my early 30s, when probably you know and I know a lot of England players, because of egos, because of arrogance, would have said, okay, I'll step away from it. They wouldn't sit in the stand for a year and a half waiting for the odd minute here and there. So that picture and that penalty sort of remind me of that. But it was one of these nervousness, walking up there, you thought, well, I'm just going to have to hit it. I knew what I wanted to do with the penalty. And when it hit the back of the net, pure relief, I think.
Did you execute it how you wanted to? Did it all go perfectly, like in your head when you stepped up?
It did, but every time I re-watch it and see the goalkeeper getting so close to it, I keep thinking, like Gazza's, just missed one at the far post to win us the game against Germany. that penalty, I keep seeing the goalkeeper maybe keeping it out on occasion, you know.
When you look at those two teams then, Italia 90, Euro 96, which do you think should have maybe won a trophy out of those two teams?
I think the 96 team was the better side. It was the best team I've ever played in my whole football career. I think it had leadership, it had a bit of know-how. Gazza was in both, who was arguably the best. The hard-nosed professionalism of some of the players, Shearer and Sheringham. Ince was playing in Italy at the time on the top of his form. Alongside me, you know, Gareth and Tony Adams, some real top performers. Probably Dave Seaman was at his pomp and the best in the world at the time. We had some real top performers.
Who was the best player you played with at England?
Gazza. I'd have to say Gazza. When I first got in the squad, Brian Robson was the captain and he was carrying England on his shoulders in the 80s. But I've got to say, probably if I was going to pick one individual, it would be Gazza.
Why did he stand out so much?
Had arrogance on a football pitch, had professionalism in his own way. You couldn't drag him off a training pitch. You really couldn't, you know. He ran as hard as anybody, could be effective in both boxes, could head it, could use both feet. He was just the ultimate player. He was a box-to-box midfield player who could score goals and tackle. So,
why do you think, obviously we've seen England teams over the years be so brilliant for their clubs, and then when it gets to international level it doesn't quite work. Why do you think that's been the case for such a long time?
I think there's a few bits and pieces thrown in the mix there. You've got to get the balance and the blend right. It's all very well picking superstars and top stars and throwing together and expect them just to go out and win. I think we've seen that with PSG recently over the last few years. Until they got the blend right, then they go on and win the Champions League. You've got to get the blend right. Sometimes you have to put an ugly duckling in there to facilitate the rest of the players, if you like. That's one thing. On top of that as well, you've got to look and say penalty shootouts haven't been kind to us, but we lacked preparation. We've solved that issue now, and I think England are probably the most prepared team for a penalty shootout. And I've played in 3 major tournaments. 2 of those I've gone home at semi-final stage on a penalty shootout because of lack of preparation in my eyes.
Yeah. Right, that brings us on nicely then to this upcoming World Cup under Thomas Tuchel. When you look at this England squad, and you know, I've worked with Thomas Tuchel quite a lot when he was at Chelsea, and he's not the sort of manager, I don't believe, that is just going to pick the superstars. I feel like he's going to pick the right players in the right positions that he thinks is going to be the best to win. Where do you see this England team at right now? And just first of all, can they go and win this World Cup?
Well, there's no reason why they can't win it. I don't think they're favourites to win it, but there's no reason why they can't. I think Thomas has shown that when I've done an interview with him or talked to him, he's very open. You ask him an honest question, he'll give you an honest answer, where you think sometimes when you're in that position, you've got to be a bit of a politician. He hasn't been that. He's given honest answers all the time, which I quite enjoy. He's also as well made tough calls. You know, Bellingham has played second fiddle some of this season to Morgan Rogers, who's played extremely well. And I think he's worked out as well. If you've got Harry Kane up front, you have to have mobile wingers to go past people in wide areas. So that balance looks good to me going into this World Cup. And then we've just got to hope we can defend well enough and cope with some of the climate changes that we're going to experience.
Now, obviously, Gareth Southgate, you know, changed the whole culture of English football and took us to a different level that we perhaps never thought we would get to for whatever reason. Is Thomas Tuchel the one that could get us over the line? Because obviously, you know, it's frustrating because of all the brilliant work that Gareth did, that we never quite got there. Why do you think that was? And is Tuchel the right man to get us over the line?
Well, I think you'll only find out with time whether Tuchel's going to be good enough to get us over the line. And there's going to be a few variables, the draw, where you're finishing groups, all of those types of things, for small margins we're working to. So we'll find out in time. At that time, if he hasn't done that, people will be looking back at Gareth and saying, wow, there's some manager that we've let go from the hierarchy here. I personally think that the FA should have said to Gareth, we want you to stay inside the FA, and I felt this about Bobby Robson as well, to overview all the age group teams right the way through, incorporating the seniors as well to work with them. I think that would have been a brilliant job for someone like him who really cares about England, you know, not just himself and the England team doing well, but the whole process that I know Gareth does. So they're the margins you're working to in many ways. As I say, Gareth's changed the culture massively. And people don't realise that. Sometimes the outgoing manager, the king is dead, long live the king. Yeah. I hope Thomas is successful, I really do. Gareth's a great friend of mine, I respect what he's done for England. Yeah. But whoever's at the helm of the England national team, I'm a fan, end of.
When you look at this England squad now then, you know, we've had unbelievable teams that haven't won stuff, and recently we've had brilliant squads that have come so close. Yeah. Where do you rank this current crop of England players in terms of squads and compare it to teams of the past? Where does it rank for you?
Difficult to say. I think they're more competent with the football, without a doubt. I think maybe in time gone by we've had better defenders. Yeah. From an attacking point of view, we've been as good yesteryear as we probably are now. You know, I say Lineker compares to anybody, compares to Harry Kane, maybe as Rooney. Wayne probably didn't deliver on the major stage how I expected him to in some ways, you know. So, there's a lot of comparisons. Defensively, I wonder whether the comparisons are there. That will be the question mark I've got going to the summer. Yeah.
If England are to get over the line, what are they going to have to do? How do they do it?
I always used to say when I was England under-21 boss, there's a tick box what you've got to do. You've got to have probably your starting 11 of players that are going to deliver sort of 8 out of 10 performances. You've got to win a penalty shootout or 2 en route. Yeah. You've got to make sure your discipline's good. You don't get a player sent off because that's can be costly and send you home. You've got to make sure that you've done all the preparation for a penalty shootout. Gareth done that. Yeah. There's no doubt about that over time. That's why we've got successful. And the one thing that Thomas hasn't done, taken a national team to a major finals, and sometimes if I've seen over time gone by, managing in the Premier League or in Europe or whatever is one thing, but understanding how to prep your team going into a major tournament, how much training, how much rest, the combination of the two that you need to do, what the players actually need. And I would say in 2010 I was on the coaching staff with Fabio, and we went pre-tournament before South Africa to Austria, and it's raining and the players are running and they're doing physical work. They don't need that. Yeah. They need to unwind a little bit, and you need to relax them, tick them over and relax them and bring them up again. The only way you find that out, which I did in my time, I had a playing career going to major tournaments, and secondly, I'd managed at tournaments on a few different occasions, whether it be the Olympic team, the under-21s, and you work out what is best for those players arriving at that tournament and keeping their mental side fresh.
We obviously like to put a lot of pressure on England teams.
Really?
Do you feel like it's too much pressure? Do you feel like there's such thing as too much pressure?
In yesteryear, I would say yes. Yeah. I think since Gareth's come in, he's gone a hell of a long way to relieve that a little bit by managing the expectations of the fans and also the media as well. So I think the media are more supportive, all strains of media are more supportive to the England national team than they ever have been over this last 8 years or so. Yeah. And I think that's quite refreshing.
When you look at this England squad then, I would say pick the 3 players that you think are going to be most vital, but I feel like that's a really obvious question. Who would you go?
I would go straight down the spine of the team probably and say Mark Gahey at the heart of defence. Nice. I would say Declan Rice and Harry Kane. If all 3 of those deliver those 8 out of 10 performances, we've got something to build on around that. There's the skeleton of your team. Yeah. We've got something to build on in and around that to go on and win matches. You've got to get the balance right. You can only pick 26 players. Yeah. Thomas Tuchel looks as though he's, as we found out over time, I don't think you can, me personally, I don't think you can play Palmer or Foden in a wide area. I would want a winger to go past. So they're vying for a central midfield berth. If you feel as though you can't accommodate them in a numbers game, someone's got to stay at home. So that's the nature of it. But that's why Thomas gets paid the big bucks.
Very true. Who would you start as England's number 10?
I would Morgan Rogers.
Would you? So you'd leave Jude Bellingham on the bench?
Yeah. Wow. Because I think if you've managed and stood in the technical area and people have done a brilliant job for you for a calendar year, which Morgan Rogers has for England, it's been brilliant. I think you've got to back them and reward them. I don't think it's such a big thing, our starting lineup at the first game at the World Cup. It'll evolve. So it's not a big deal. You've got to do your due diligence on certain players and make sure that you keep everyone on side and enhance the fact that the squad is the most important thing, not necessarily the team. But you've got to make those, what the outside people think are contentious calls. I don't think it is. I think all you're doing is rewarding people for getting you to the final. At that stage, you're saying to them, you 11 are in the starting 11. You can only play yourself out of this team now. And the ones behind, put pressure on them. End of.
When you look at the players in today's game then, Stuart, is there anyone you look at and think it sort of reminds them of you when you were a player?
No one that's a direct comparison, but I would say Thomas Tuchel, you know, his endeavour, his professionalism, his ability to actually, you know, put his heart and soul on the line for the club that he represents. You know, he'll run through a brick wall for the calls, he'll head it in both boxes, he'll run between boxes quicker than anybody on a recovery run, you know, and I know his levels of professionalism because I've worked with him. So I admire him from a footballing aspect. My favourite player in the Premier League's Bernardo Silva. He's nothing like me and like how I played, but he runs more than anybody. He deals with the ball better than anybody. He takes people on when he has to, and when there's two players facing him up, he rolls it to a teammate with the perfect weight and quality. He's the perfect footballer. If
you could change one result in your footballing career, what would it be and why?
Be a World Cup semi-final against Germany. In fact, if I could extend that at all,
I'll allow you.
Thank you, it's very good here. I've been beaten in 4 semi-finals in my career. 2 against Liverpool in the FA Cup and 2 against West Germany in the Euros. And I think if I'd have won those, I think I'd have got my hands on maybe at least 2 trophies, maybe 3 or 4 even.
And when people look back on you and your career, what do you want to be remembered for?
Someone who cared about the club that I worked for. Someone who gave his all and left nothing to chance. Someone who was the ultimate professional in an era that maybe it wasn't as professional as it could be. And someone who stayed very humble on that journey.
And the final question then, Stuart, is you've got to pick a 5-a-side of players you've either coached or you've played with, past or present.
Right.
Putting you on the spot.
Well, not many.
So quite a big question.
I would probably pick Peter Shilton just above Dave Seaman, but that is a really tough call. Des Walker, Paul Gascoigne. Well, probably Gary Lineker, and I need one more from somewhere.
You need one more.
Yeah,
some 5-a-side. Some 5-a-sides already. I reckon just with those 4 players you'd beat
Can I pick
teams.
Myself to play alongside
of course you
them?
can.
I'm going to do that then.
There
Why
we
not?
go. Stuart Pearce alongside them. When you think of all of the players that you've played with and coached with, is it ever to go beyond your wildest dreams?
I think when I turned from electrician, watching Brian Clough on telly, watching Brian Robson, watching Glenn Hoddle and whatever, and all of a sudden you're in the same company as them, you're in a technical area facing them maybe, or you're working for them. It's quite incredible. I was a young kid supporting QPR and all of a sudden I'm under 21s manager, and Don Givens, who used to play for QPR, is the Republic of Ireland's under 21 manager, and I'm thinking, well, it's Don Givens, you know. Or I had a text message from David Webb, who used to play for Chelsea and Queen's Park Rangers, one of my idols. His son texted me and said, David's turning 80, would I send him a message? Because he knows that you're a big fan. He would really. Or I'd done some TV work many years ago with Gordon Banks, who was, you know, Gordon Banks and Dave Webb, top of the tree for me for inspiration when I was a youngster.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good work. Well done.